Hello and welcome back. We are back with Gothic Undone. My name is Patrice. I know none of my intros are the same, but I'm not here to be a perfectionist. In fact, I'm not anywhere to be a perfectionist. But what I am here to do is to talk about our much loved spooky folklore. Now, as I am half Irish, I do have a fondness for Celtic folklore, specifically Irish folklore. So that's what we are starting back with. That's not to say that's all we're going to be doing, but that's what we're starting back with. And what was quite interesting is not that long ago, probably a week ago, I was in Ireland visiting family from a particular part of Ireland that my father is from. I may have mentioned this in one of my other videos, I'm not sure. But I remember my husband asking me what the difference of a fairy ring was and when there's like a patch of land with no grass, right? And there are a lot of reasons that people have come up with as to why these things exist, and whether that patch of land with no grass is a fairy ring or not, or whether a fairy ring is a ring of flowers, usually like daisies, in a perfect circle. We're not talking specifically about fairy rings today, but what we are talking about is part of Irish folklore, and it is pronounced. Ancestors, help me with this one. Ooh, hold on. Let me look at my notes. Let me not pretend that I'm fluent in Gaelic, because I'm not. Right. Fa fordach. Fa fordach. Fa means grass, and then fordach, I don't know what that means, but it's basically a hungry patch of land, essentially, right? Which is fascinating. So I have quite a few books on Irish myths and legends that I like to explore, and this one talks about this hungry patch of land that can exist, and you see it, and the reason why you may see that this patch of land is barren and there's all this grass and flowers around it is because somebody has had to take care of it, and the way they've had to take care of it is, like for others, not just for themselves, is by throwing salt on the land. As we know, salt is very protective. Like I said, I like my Celtic sea salt, very, very good one, but any salt in general, throw it on that area of land and burn it. And that's when you'll see this perfect circle of barren earth. But in other ways, they are often created when vile acts took place in what was considered precious sacred land. And I may say holy areas in this sense, but when I say it, I don't mean in the current Abrahamic religions. I'm talking about Irish paganism and the religion of old that would have existed back then. So what would have happened is in these areas of land near what we call She, which is spelt Sidhe but pronounced She, those are considered lands of sacred meaning. And if a horrible tragedy has happened there, something horrific, sorry, that was my bottle of water, something horrific where, like for example, somebody could have been murdered, or another disgusting act that I'm sure we can think of that many people do tend to unfortunately carry out, what ends up happening is that patch of land will forever be tainted. And if you walk on it, and what seems to be interesting here is unless somebody has actually tried to get rid of it, you won't be able to tell. You're just the unfortunate person. Now, some people will say to avoid that, to accidentally walk on this patch of land that has been tainted by somebody at some point, is to in your pocket carry some bread. So like a crust of bread, for example, or sometimes they say that you could scatter as you go, like oats or breadcrumbs behind you as you're having a little walk along, right? That's another one that they come across. But when stepped on, if you are unfortunate enough to step on this land without having any bread there to protect you, what ends up happening is you then get this unsatiable hunger that the land had. It is imparted upon to you. So you now are the one whose taste of a meal, a very filling meal that you may have eaten every single dinner time, lunchtime, breakfast, that will never satiate you. You will never feel satisfied. You will always feel this aching hunger. It's quite similar to the stories of the Wendigo, which, not the story itself, but in terms that a Wendigo's hunger can never be satiated. So, for example, because it can't, then what happens is the same with this situation. You can eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, but it's almost like you're eating fresh air, because you will become a shriveled up husk of a human being and eventually starve to death, because they, unlike with the Wendigo where the shriveled up husk continues to roam, this doesn't happen. This is a situation where, as far as I'm also seeing, it cannot be broken. It can only be something that you could protect yourself from beforehand, because if you walked over the patch of grass, like I said, there's no foliage that would give it away. So it's not like you could then go back to that area and say, okay, well, I'm going to scatter salt and burn it, and that will be the curse undone. I'm afraid not. Not today, anyway. So that was one that I found interesting, because it was something that I discussed not long ago. And like I said, very different to fairy wings. Fairy wings? Yes, fairy rings. Also, I'm missing a nail, so I put this on it. I know, creative. Anyway, what we're moving on to next in folklore is another one which I do really enjoy, is the fetch. Now, I have briefly discussed the fetch before, but I have found out a little bit more information, and I want to delve deeper, because I can. So, the fetch, and again, pronounced differently in Gaelic, of course. Let me find it. So, Feithid. Right, and again, it depends on what part of region of Ireland you come from, but it's known as the Feithid, and it may it's known to be more located, as in its origins, to County Waterford, but that doesn't mean it stays there. But it can go all over Ireland. And I explained this before with the Banshee. With the Banshee, we know that she's part of the Fae and she can go all over Ireland, but she cannot leave Ireland. So for those people that continuously in their paranormal stories or their ghost hunting say that it's a Banshee, if you're not in Ireland or Scotland, it's not a Banshee, okay? Again, with the fetch. A fetch is all over Ireland, and again, because Celtic stories, there are, part of Cornwall is Celtic as well, and some parts of the north of England have also got some stories of the fetch. But from this aspect, we are discussing strictly from Irish folklore. So moving on to the fetch, let's get a little image. So getting back to the fetch, as we know, I mentioned before about it being quite similar to a doppelganger. And, that's originally from the similarities to the Norse, which is a word I cannot pronounce, but I will give it a go. It's Vardoga, or doppelganger being the German word, so being like double person, double of. I don't know the direct translation. However, the Feithid in Gaelic, in Irish, means like apparition or phantom, and that's why quite often the fetch is seen as quite pale, and a lot of people believe that it was somebody returning from their grave. However, as mentioned, some may see them out in locations, for example, where they're just walking amongst a crowd and they lack any kind of human, like normal kind of humanly emotions you would see with somebody moving around. They could be cities, villages, just passing by your house, and you glimpse them and you do feel this eerie shiver down your spine. Something is not quite right. The time of day that you see a fetch, as I'm sure I've mentioned in a previous video, is very important, because it is believed that if you see your spooky double around dusk or midnight, it means your death is going to happen very, very soon. However, if you see your strange, scary, pale double in the morning, then it means you're going to live a long life. So yeah, I guess timing is everything in this matter. However, when it comes to a few stories about the fetch, quite often people say that a fetch doesn't so much appear as a doppelganger, but appears to a third party. So it appears to somebody else. There is a famous story in County Waterford, and this is in the 18th century, which happened to a Lady Beresford. Now, allegedly, Lady Beresford told the story of how she was fast asleep, and something stirred her from her sleep, and she sat up in her bed, and at the end of the bed, she saw her husband, Lord Beresford. However, she knew for a fact that he was very far away at the time and was not home. So she was quite scared by this, and then when she went to light a candle, she noticed that he was gone. Now, of course, there was no way she could send him a text or a call to find out what was happening, but what sadly did happen is the following day she did receive a message that her husband had passed away the day before. So some believe that when a fetch is seen, and a person is seen that is not really there, it is not so much an evil or a malevolent thing, like as in a omen of doom, but it's something for like a loved one to almost say goodbye. And that's why it's often associated with apparition or phantom in Irish folklore. Another one is a story, and this, by the way, is from an excellent site I found called Fireside Horror by P.A. Sheldon. So I do suggest checking it out, because he, or they, should I say, have a lot of great stories. So this one is called A Visitor in the Mist. So in a village near Enniskillen in Northern Ireland, an elderly gentleman said that one misty night he was disturbed by repeated knocking on his door. Creep myself out, excellent. Looking through the window, he saw that it was his son, who he had believed was actually miles away in Dublin, nowhere near their family home. When he quickly ran and opened the door, there was, of course, no one standing there. His dog was whimpering and refused to go anywhere near the threshold by his master's side, which was very unusual, as this dog followed him everywhere. But it was the next morning, of course, that the very sad news arrived to the poor man and told him that his son had passed away in the night from a fever. Many people do say that their loved ones come to them before they pass on, or they find out they pass on. Some people have said they've received text messages. Others have said that they have received missed phone calls when it was impossible to happen. So I suppose in what you necessarily believe is how you could see this. There are stories of a different type of fetch, or how a fetch can be perceived as well, which is of course through a mirror. As we have discussed in other videos, and I'm sure many have heard before if you are a lover of spooky things, is that mirrors can be portals. They can be portals that let in energy or let energy out, as in drain your energy. Now, being a witch myself, I do something called locking my mirrors, which we could get onto another time if you're interested, but it is something that I think is important, especially where you sleep. I also do not believe a mirror above the bed or in front of the bed, or even facing the bed, catching a glimpse of you at all, is a good idea. The mirror should not be facing you. But that's my personal beliefs. Of course, others have different beliefs, and I know that there are other cultures in the world that also hold those same beliefs. But so the report that came from County Clare in the 19th century was of a young lady who was getting ready for a local dance. She was getting herself all dolled up and ready, and she claimed to see her reflection blink when she didn't, but the reflection did. That scared her, as you can imagine, because her own eyes were moving independently of her own actions. That would scare anyone. Of course, she was absolutely horrified, and she informed her mother. Sadly, the young woman then passed later that day from a heart condition, and the local said that the mirror had shown her her own fetch. So it is believed that you can see your own in the morning or the evening. Others see people's. So it's not so much when others see people's, they don't necessarily mean it's an omen, but just information, or maybe the apparition saying goodbye. But then there's the ones that say, no, it's definitely not good. You know, the encounters of the mirrors are the ones that are independent. So these are your independent reflection does something that it's not supposed to do. For example, we may have seen in horror movies where somebody turns around and their reflection doesn't turn around, or it turns around like 3 seconds later. You know, there's that weird delay, which understandably would freak people out. That can often be described as a fetch. Or there's the other example, and this has been a scene where also can be compared to the vampire, where the fetch has no reflection. So you may be thinking you are talking to the actual person, but you're not. You're actually with the fetch. That is their doppelganger, and one clear way to tell is that they will have no reflection in a mirror or a window or any reflective surface. So the mirror will only show maybe you or an empty room where the person is meant to be standing. Where it is seen, as I mentioned, the omen of death is where, whether in a mirror or a window or walking in a distant location. And that's usually a sign that the individual will die within the year if you see your own in a mirror, a window, or a reflective surface, as we mentioned with the young lady. So again, it very much depends on what you believe. In many folklores and in part of our belief, we also believe that you need to open a window when somebody passes away. So sadly, we have had people that are close to us pass away, and very quickly, so that the spirit of the loved one does not get trapped in any mirrors or windows or reflective surfaces in the house, we open a window for their spirit to leave. Not all people may believe that, but that is most definitely something that we have done to ensure that their spirit can safely pass on to the other side, and hopefully with safe passage beyond the veil. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to be here with me today and listen to our spooky folklore and some of our information of where we should maybe tread lightly when it comes back to the Feithid. I think I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize to my own people. But needless to say, we shall be continuing with all things scary, spooky, strange and unusual, whether it be our folklore from around the world or whether it be horror movies and the like. As I mentioned in the last video, if you have recommendations in terms of horror movies you'd like me to discuss, then drop it in the comment section. If you have a particular folklore or folklore creature you'd like me to look into, I'm more than happy to. I have quite a few books now on Celtic folklore, so some of them may be more from there. There's also some on Celtic witchcraft, so there may be some videos there. However, I of course love to research from different cultures too. I heard some very interesting ones from Filipino folklore and folklore creatures not too long ago, so that may be coming up. But like I said, any suggestions, pop them below. If you would like to, subscribe, feel free. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like. And of course, I will see you next time, which may be tomorrow, maybe another day, who knows. But for now, stay spooky, stay safe, look after yourselves and each other, because I love you. Mwah.